You need to hear this if you're a thriller fan. A stormy night, a cryptic message, and a mystery waiting to unfold. Chris, a thrill seeker in his 20s, stared at his phone. A message blinked on screen, a set of coordinates with a warning. Don't go alone. Who could have sent this? And why the caution? Curiosity gnawed at him. Ignoring the storm, Chris grabbed his gear and set out. Each step drenched in mystery, each thunderclap echoing his heartbeat. The coordinates led him to an eerie, remote location. The air thick with suspense, Chris knew this night would be unforgettable. Subscribe to join Chris on more thrilling adventures. And remember, sometimes curiosity leads to the most extraordinary stories. The road was narrow and unwelcoming. Chris gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white in the dim light. Each twist and turn brought him closer to his destination, the abandoned house on Blackwood Lane. Trees pressed in on either side, their branches gnarled and skeletal against the twilight sky. An unnatural stillness hung in the air, broken only by the rhythmic thump of his heart against his ribs. He had heard the stories, of course. Who hadn't? The old house, they said, was a place of sorrow, its timbers soaked in tragedy. He had always been drawn to the unknown, his curiosity outweighing his apprehension. Now, as the house loomed into view, a shiver of anticipation, laced with fear, shot down his spine. The house stood alone at the end of the road, shrouded in an ethereal mist. It was a Gothic monstrosity, all sharp angles and decaying grandeur. Its windows were dark eyes watching his approach. The once bright paint was peeling, revealing the rotten wood beneath. Despite himself, Chris felt a thrill course through him. This was it. This was where the legend lived. Chris parked a safe distance away, his unease growing with each passing second. He stepped out of the car into the cold night air. The silence was unnerving, complete save for the distant screech of an owl. The fog, thick and cloying, seemed to press against him, suffocating him. He could feel the house watching him. Its empty windows stared, judging his every move. Taking a deep breath, he started towards it, his footsteps loud on the overgrown path. The air grew colder as he neared the porch, the temperature dropping noticeably. He hesitated at the foot of the steps. The house seemed to radiate a palpable sense of menace, warning him away. But Chris was not one to be deterred. He had come too far, his curiosity burning too bright. He placed his foot on the first step, the wood groaning ominously beneath his weight. With each step he felt a growing sense of dread, a feeling that he was crossing a line he could never uncross. The front door creaked open, its hinges protesting loudly in the stillness. The air inside was stale and heavy, thick with the scent of decay and something else, something unnameable that sent chills prickling down his spine. He stepped inside, the floorboards groaning underfoot. Dust motes danced in the faint moonlight filtering through the grimy windows. Cobwebs hung like macabre decorations from every corner. The house was a tomb, frozen in time. As his eyes adjusted to the gloom, he began to make out the remnants of a life long gone. A tattered armchair sat before a cold fireplace, a book lying open and forgotten on its seat. A grandfather clock, its hands frozen at 11:15, cast an eerie shadow across the hallway. A sudden noise from the floor above made him jump. It was a soft sound, like a whisper, barely audible. He strained to listen, his heart pounding in his chest. There it was again, a soft sigh, followed by the distinct sound of footsteps. Someone or something was watching him. He decided to start his exploration on the ground floor. He moved from room to room, each one as desolate and eerie as the last. The intricate needlework depicted a young girl with sad eyes and a haunting smile. On a mahogany desk lay a leather-bound diary. The words belonged to a girl named Lisa, the former resident of the house. The whispers have grown louder, Lisa had written. Section 5. The Mirror's Reflection. A sudden crash shattered the silence, jolting Chris back to the present. His heart pounded as he made his way up the creaking staircase. The air grew colder with each step. He paused at the landing, listening intently. The only sound was his own pulse. He moved down the hallway, hand trailing along the wall. He stopped outside a room at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar, faint humming from within. He pushed the door open slowly. The room was a child's nursery. A rocking horse stood frozen in mid-gallop. On the far wall hung a large, ornate mirror. Chris noticed something strange about the mirror's reflection. It didn't reflect the room behind him. Instead, it showed a young girl with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. Before Chris could react, the mirror exploded in a shower of glass. He stumbled back, heart racing. Section 6. The Girl in the Cellar. Shaken but determined to uncover the truth, Chris continued his exploration. He found a narrow, rickety staircase hidden behind a tapestry in the master bedroom. It led down into the darkness, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something rotten. He descended cautiously, each step echoing in the oppressive silence. The air grew colder as he went deeper, the darkness pressing in on him like a physical weight. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers trembling, and switched on the flashlight. The weak beam cut through the gloom, revealing a dirt floor and rough-hewn stone walls. He was in the cellar, a place forgotten by time. And that's when he saw her. She was huddled in the corner, her back pressed against the wall. Her long black hair hid her face, but he could see the tattered remnants of a white dress. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he was looking at Lisa. Section 7. Trapped in Terror. He took a step toward her, his hand outstretched. "Lisa?" he whispered, his voice hoarse with fear and anticipation. The figure slowly raised her head, her hair falling away to reveal a face that was both familiar and horrifying. Her skin was as pale as death, her eyes two empty sockets staring into eternity. Her lips were drawn back in a grotesque parody of a smile, revealing rows of sharp, pointed teeth. Chris stumbled back, his foot catching on a loose floorboard. He fell, landing hard on the damp earth. A scream rose in his throat, but he choked it back, his eyes fixed on the creature before him. Lisa, if that was even her true form anymore, began to move towards him. Her movements were slow, deliberate, like a spider stalking its prey. She glided over the ground, her feet not seeming to touch the floor. Terror lent him a surge of adrenaline. He scrambled back, his eyes frantically searching for an escape. But the cellar was a tomb, its only entrance the way he had come. Section 8. A dash to escape. He scrambled to his feet, his blood pounding in his ears. He had to get out, had to escape this nightmare. He turned and ran, his lungs burning, his legs screaming in protest. He could hear Lisa's chilling laughter echoing behind him, spurring him on. He didn't dare look back. He could feel her presence, cold and menacing, closing in on him. He burst through the cellar door and into the relative safety of the house. Slamming the door shut, he fumbled for something, anything, to bar her way. He found an old, rusty shovel leaning against the wall and wedged it under the doorknob. He didn't waste time checking to see if it would hold. He raced through the house, his heart pounding a frantic tattoo against his ribs. He didn't look back, didn't dare to breathe until he had burst out of the front door and into the cool night air. Section 9. A haunting reminder. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs screamed for mercy. Finally, he collapsed on the side of the road, gasping for breath. The fog had cleared and the moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow on the deserted road. His car was a beacon in the darkness. He fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He unlocked the door and practically fell into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut behind him. He sat there for a moment, his chest heaving, trying to catch his breath. He could still feel the chill of the house clinging to him, the echo of Lisa's laughter ringing in his ears. He reached for his phone, his fingers trembling. He needed to call someone, anyone. But as he glanced at the screen, his blood ran cold. There on the screen was a single message. It was from an unknown number and it simply read, "She's not done with you yet." Section 10. The Lingering Shadow. Chris stared at the message, his mind reeling. It couldn't be. He had escaped. He was safe, wasn't he? He looked back at the house. It stood silhouetted against the horizon, its windows dark and empty. Or were they? He thought he saw a flicker of movement in one of the upstairs windows, a shadow shifting in the darkness. He couldn't be sure. But one thing he knew with absolute certainty, he wasn't going back to find out. Not tonight. Not ever. He started the car and pulled away from the curb, his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. As he drove, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that Lisa's malevolent presence lingered. A shadow stretching out from the house on Blackwood Lane to follow him home. The ordeal was far from over. It had only just begun.